Hey, what's up YouTube? Welder here, and I am in the airfoil lab, Cessna 172. There's been a recent update, recent update, of X-Plane 10 called X-Plane 10.5 that creates you more auto-generated scenery and whatnot, as you can see right here. But that's not what I am making this video for. What I'm making this video for is just give you a general idea of how I view flying, how you can improve how you can fly, and just basically how I fly myself, and how to generally get the feel of an aircraft. So I'm currently at Oceanside Municipal Airport, and what I'm going to do is that I am going to take off, and I'm going to show you generally the basics of flying an airplane. So with a Cessna 172, what you're going to have is a very basic takeoff. You are going to more or less give it full throttle, as such, slowly give it more throttle, then we're going to rotate at 60 knots. You got to put in some right rudder because the torque of the propeller is going to want to be pushing you to the left. But just keep centered on the runway center line. Rotate at 60. And then, once you rotate at 60, you want to, well, you have to get past these wonderful wires, these power lines first. And then get to about a speed of about 75 knots. That's generally how you take off in a Cessna. However, it is always different from plane to plane. This is what a 172 does, and it's a very basic type of takeoff. There's no landing gear you have to concern yourself over. There are no VR speeds that change based on what your weight is. You don't have to give it like 92% N1 so that you don't have to worry about, well, to put it simply, you don't have to worry about the N1 position so that you don't overspeed or overwork your engines and whatnot. The Cessna 172 is basic. It is not a jet. It is not an airplane with a landing gear. It is not really a powerful aircraft in general. Well, it is a powerful aircraft relatively. This is definitely not an F-15. But even though it is not the most powerful airplane in the world, it still gives you basic principles of how to fly an aircraft, even though it's not the most powerful aircraft in the world. For example, if you look at this turning coordinator, you'll notice that the artificial airplane is right on the bar. That is pretty much a standard rate turn. Now, you can go further than that, and in doing so, you're going to get into a sharper turn. But as you turn sharper, you also need to pull up the elevators just to keep yourself stable. Because the more you turn, the less lift you're going to produce. And this is only a 30-degree bank. We could go even further than that. Onto here, which is a 45-degree angle bank. But that's generally something I would not recommend. Once you get up to altitude, and I'm going to level off at 2,500 feet, there are some things that I would like to bring up. For example, once you are at your cruising altitude, you don't necessarily need all this power, so we'll go ahead, pull this back. I'll be honest, I've never been good at keeping up with the altitude of an airplane. You almost generally want to have a straight and level flight when you're cruising, and you only turn when you absolutely need to. Such as if you're going to another vector, or you are, well, if you need to avoid an object, something like that, then of course definitely turn. But as it stands, you don't need all that thrust. So you'd pull it back, make things generally pretty easy for you. And I'm going about 85 knots as is. Keeping it full throttle is just going to waste you gas, it's going to waste you time, and you're not going to go as fast as you think you're going to go. Another thing that I should mention is that you should trim it out. Use the trim wheel to your advantage, that way you don't have to fight the yoke. Up and down, generally I have to keep it to the right because, as I said before, you do have to worry about torque. Torque is a big deal in a propeller plane. But what if you want to climb? Well, in that case, you definitely should push it all the way. Give it to full power, so let's climb to about 3,000 feet. As you can tell, giving it full throttle will increase, but one thing I should always make clear, you should never, ever, 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 ever try to climb unless you give it full throttle, or unless you give yourself more thrust if you're in a jet. Doing so will lower your airspeed, and that puts you in a position of a stall. Now if you want to descend, the opposite's true. You just decrease the throttle, trim it out so you have a decent descent rate, and you will drop. But generally you have the 3 P's that you have to consider: power, pull, and pitch. The first thing you always do is that you apply more power. Once more power is applied, then you pull back on the stick, and then once you're at an angle that you feel comfortable with, you pitch trim it. You trim it out. But you always pull on the stick before you trim it, unless you're making slight adjustments. And that's generally the basics of how I fly a plane. If you're in something like, let's say, a fighter jet, or something that's very maneuverable, that becomes even more so the case. If you were to look at my old videos, I always apply power before I climb. And I almost always, unless a missile is going after me, I pull back on the throttle when I nosedive down. Otherwise, I run the risk of overspeeding. But that's just a small thing I wanted to share a general gist of. I also wonder if the update has made it more stable, because as it stands, there really isn't a whole lot of scenery going on, and I plan on fixing that, so in a little bit I'm going to, actually maybe right now, I'm going to change that, and let's actually first go for a landing. I'm not going to do your standard base turn landing. I'm just going to align myself with the runway eventually, just so that I can eventually land this thing. Landing these small planes is pretty much easy. I did bring up a tutorial about that, and well, by now you should have watched it because the card always appears. I'm going to actually change that card to something a little bit more interesting, because people have been seeing that too many times, and it's been a while. I need to update that. In fact, I actually need to make an updated video on landing, because the MiG-21 landing that I had was just absolutely terrible. I didn't think I broke the landing gear, but I did, and people were actually quick to point that out. Which is fine. I mean, I don't know everything, and it's fine that I don't know everything, and if you correct me, perfect. You can't go anywhere with a world of sycophants. it stands right now, I just need to cross the 76 and then relocate the airport. I swear, the geography of this area is not 100% accurate because this freeway that I'm looking at right now, well, it's not actually a freeway, it's just a highway. That is Highway 76, and Oceanside's airport is supposed to be right on the 76, but it is not. It's like over where my pitot tube is. Oh yeah, there it is. It's right there. Could that be the 78? No, it might actually be the 78. I stand corrected if that's the 78. And right next to that airport is the 76. It might be a little bit more accurate than I gave it credit for. Still, because X-Plane has been so unstable, I don't really have a lot of autogen scenery on for it. That should be corrected. I love how I'm just totally throwing the traffic pattern out the window so that I can land. The magical things that you can do in a simulator when your life is not at stake, right? Well, that's weird. Seems like I need to reconfigure my... Seems like I might need to reconfigure my little lab configuration because it is not working right now. Well, challenges for a later time. I will fix that eventually. Also, don't mind the fuel pump. I was basically forgetful about that the entire flight. Now, one thing that I need to mention about landing, and I did bring this up before, but a lot of people have brought it up a second time. Maybe I wasn't clear enough. But basically, when you're in a landing configuration, there is an inverse in input. And what I mean by that is that you generally control the descent rate of the airplane with your throttle and not your pitch. You control the speed at which you're going with your pitch and not your throttle. However, even then, both tend to work in conjunction with each other. I could actually pull the nose up and that'll actually make me descend more, but I'm not going to do that because I've seemed to be pretty good on the path. Also, I think I might actually be landing into a tailwind. I'm not entirely sure, but no big deal. Generally, you get a sea breeze when you are this close to the ocean, so landing near the ocean is always a safe bet, but you know, just always make sure the traffic pattern, always check the automated weather. It'll tell you which runway to land on. Easy, right? like how this thing doesn't have a PAPI, even though Oceanside's airport should have one, and this one does not. There we go. But, yeah, generally that's the gist of flying an airplane. I hope it was more instructional than just stupid ramblings on my part, though it was probably more of the latter. Oh, another thing. Make sure with a propeller plane, and by propeller plane. Anyway, when you're with a prop plane and one that involves a piston-driven engine, always keep your RPMs highish. If I were to lower the set RPMs, then what will happen is that eventually the RPMs will slow to the point where it kills the engine. Now, of course, I do have a fuel pump on. Maybe that's why. Not to mention that this would hurt the vacuum as well. But yeah, generally you don't want to be in that area. It makes it dangerously close to killing, so bring up the RPM. Now, if you need to kill the engine, there is a fuel shutoff valve. Don't do that. All you need to do is, for one, turn off the avionics. You don't need it anymore. 2, pull the mixture. There we go. Then 3, turn off your lights. 4, turn off your batteries, and 5, turn off your magnetos. I don't know if that is the correct order or the proper order, but that's generally what you're supposed to do.